welcome to Coding After Work podcast. No, it's not the podcast.
Not the podcast.
No, this is an outtake, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, stream. It's a stream. But it is our second episode of Presentation Skill. I did get that one right.
It is.
Awesome.
It is. At least that's what I have practiced and prepared.
Oh.
Actually, you did most of the preparing.
So a lot of outtakes today.
Yeah.
Should you?
Yeah, sure.
I think you should.
Let's kick this off. So we call this episode PowerPoint the Right Way. Now, presentation skills is a lot like UX. We need to adapt the UI, or in this case, the presentation, to the user in a way that the user can take in the information and make smart decisions. Now, if we adapt our presentation to the limitation and strength of the human mind, our listeners will retain a lot more information. Now, we have looked at what presentation skills actually are, and found there are general three things. Removing the things that take away from your presentation. Adding things that will add value to the presentation, and adapting the visuals and language to the audience. When I started my current job, I was invited into a mandatory meeting. I had to be there. I get there and I see a PowerPoint looking kind of like this. Now, this isn't the actual slide. For some reason, they don't want me to have that. I have asked for it, but never gotten it. But the number of bullet points was pretty much the same. And we see presentations like this far too often. PowerPoint has a very neat feature. When you add too much content, it will lower the font size. That is not a good feature. Now the presenter was talking and talking and talking. And after a while, I realized that she was about halfway through this list. Halfway through the agenda. I noticed the bullet points was starting to change in my head. Who else is in this meeting? I mean, since it was a mandatory meeting. Ooh, a notification. I wonder who that is. Oh, a new follower. Awesome. I'm hungry. I wonder what I should have for dinner. And who would I rather fight? A horse-sized duck or a duck-sized horse? Or 50 duck-sized horses? And how massive would that duck be? Now, Google did not disappoint me. This is what a duck would look like. Or 50 duck-sized horses.
So which would you rather fight?
Well, ducks, I like ducks more than horses.
So you don't want to fight the ducks?
No.
Horses it is.
Yeah. I am, however, pollen allergic, so that kind of works better in Swedish.
A lot more in Swedish. And for those who is Swedish of you, I'm so sorry about the bad pun.
Now, can anyone recognize this kind of chain of events where your head is going into other places all the time?
All of them.
All the moments.
All the moments. Not the duck, though.
Now, there are a lot of things that we can do to prevent these kinds of issues. We don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over again without thinking. Because what happened after this meeting was that people who saw the same presentation as I did now at this very moment is perhaps working on their own presentation, and they're doing it in the exact same way. So let's go back to a slide again. This is an out-of-the-box theme for a content slide. There are, of course, much worse templates than this one. I can't imagine how those would look, but fair enough.
This is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
For a theme.
Yeah. So what kind of problems do you see here? If you you can write them in the chat if you want to. There are 4 things that will always steal focus and attention. And that is size, color, contrast, and movement. But we can use these 4 things to direct the audience where we want them to be as well. Now this looks about right for a person the presentation is perhaps a little bit big in this case.
Oh, you mean like in a real presentation where we actually could meet people?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
It's been a year.
It's been a year, yeah. So this is kind of we have some kind of big screen, and the person is usually way smaller than the screen. Now the first thing we notice is, well, the screen is bigger, and the slide has way more colors than I do. Different colors, different hues. Some scenarios, we have a really big screen. This is from Techorama, I think it was 2 years ago. This was at a cinema, so the screen was huge.
Wasn't this the IMAX theater?
It was, yes.
Yeah.
So the screen was it has way more contrast than I do. And then we add on top of that transitions and animations that is commonly used. This is horrible. Okay, the last one we haven't seen used. We've only seen it used once. And, well, you get the point. That's a lot of competition going on at the same time. The only way we can get more attention than all of that is moving around all the time. That way you will notice that I'm still standing here doing a presentation. So let's see what kind of change we can do. Usually we can't do anything about the size of the screen. We could eat more to get bigger.
But you won't get taller.
That's true.
Heels can only get you so much.
I'm too short for a presentation. No. So let's make it work for us in another way. So let's remove some of the colors just so we get a plain canvas to work with. The screen has way more contrast than I do, so we can fix that by making the background dark.
We see you.
We see me. Using a black or a dark background will turn much of the focus back to the presenter. Now, I'm the presenter. The slides are just a visual tool. And this is important. The slides are not the presentation. You are. Or at least in a combination with the slides. If the slides are blinding the audience, they won't be able to see you. It doesn't have to be black. It can be just dark. So I told the people at work that I do presentation skills courses and stuff like that. And the response was, oh, great. We should learn more about PowerPoint. And I went, no. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about PowerPoint. PowerPoint is one part, but when we're talking about presentation skills, it's mainly stop using PowerPoint.
Or use it as a tool.
Yeah, use it less. Use it as a visual aid. Now, the nice thing with having a dark background is that if we want the audience full attention, we can turn it off. and the full focus is on me. Now, this is great for storytelling and stuff like that, but it does have its downsides. So if you're doing this online, which we are doing right now, well, you still would see me, but in many cases, if you just shown the slide, people will raise their hand and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the projector just went out," or the image connection was broken, and try to F5 or whatever they try to do. So some people use a text kind of like this one. This slide has intentionally been left blank. But you can also have a dark screen, but still keep some of the visuals, so it doesn't seem to be broken. Now, I mentioned before that the slide doesn't need to be black. Jessica, can you take us through some of the reasons why?
I can. I would be happy to. Let's switch places then.
Switch places.
So it all comes down to contrast and also accessibility. So if you think about contrast, we will get some of the accessibility for free. And that's kind of nice. I like free stuff. Using white on black can cause some issues with the eye fatigue. And also for people who have astigmatism, which is roughly about half of people, they can get an effect called halation, which is kind of something like this. It gets a little bit blurry or an halo effect around the text, which isn't that comfortable to read. So what is contrast really? Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG2, has great content on this if you want to really read up on this. But it's a way to measure the perceived difference in luminance or brightness between two colors. And this difference is expressed as a relationship from 1 to 1, which would be white text on a white background, or completely useless. And the other part of the scale is 21 to 1, which would be the equivalent of black text on a white background. As a reference, red, or this particular red, is 4 to 1, and blue is 8.6 to 1, which is interesting because we see red faster, but blue has better contrast. Is it just me who like to nerd down like that? So there are different levels of minimum contrast recommendations for accessibility, and these are mainly used for web accessibility or applications and stuff like that, but they work really well as a guide for our presentations as well. So for the lowest recommendation, we have AA, which have a 4.5 to 1 ratio minimum, which you can see here, over here, I think, there. Yeah, there you go. Why it's a minimum? Because it is a gray on a white. We can see it, but if you have that sort of issue, it's not the best. Then we have AAA. Now, the minimum recommendation for the majority of text is 7 to 1. But we can still use headers with 4.5, just as we did for AA. The contrast we are using here is 15.55 to 1. It won't solve all of the issues, but it will solve a lot of them. So we won't hopefully get that halation, because we have gone from, we don't have black, we have near black, and we don't have white, we have some sort of off-white or light gray, if you will, but it looks white. So Jimmy mentioned there's some good things that comes with using dark backgrounds. And if you do what Jimmy did to turn off your screen, which usually you can do with a clicker, but when you switch back, and you have a light slide or a white slide, this will happen to the first rows. Now, I have been blinded by this. I don't know how many times. And Jimmy usually looks something like this. Even if you're just using my computer, which isn't that bad. So we don't think about that contrast effect because I have the presentation behind me. I don't see it. This is not a nice feeling. So if we go back to the slide again, think about where your eyes are on this. Is there something that draws your eyes' attention a little bit more? My bet is that it's the header that draws your attention. And you might find yourself stopping longer on the header or even reading it over and over. Is that right? Do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Every time.
Every time. So let's fix that. It's a little bit better. And now I'm going to show you something that I know will bother Jimmy so much every single time. Here you go. As humans, we don't read the pages or apps. We scan them, which makes hierarchy very important. We need to showcase what's most important thing on a slide. That's what we need to do. Are you still angry?
Yep.
Yeah, he's still angry.
I mean, I've seen this slide so many times, and this time I thought, I know what slide this is going to be, and I still did it in that order.
And you saw this 2 hours ago.
Yep.
It's fantastic, isn't it? That's our brains. I love it. And especially love that it bothers you so much. But we need to know, or we need to make the decision for the audience. It's my presentation. I know what I'm trying to get across to the audience, right? So what's most important, what least important? So let's move the title to the left so it's in the line of sight and we don't have to read in a zigzag pattern. But what is most important on the slide? Is it the content or the header? I would say it's the content, but in every single presentation, well, not every, but in most cases, the title or header still have so much more weight and it's bigger. I haven't seen one single theme, PowerPoint theme or keynote theme or whatever you have that actually do this right, according to me. So let's fix that. There we go. Now, when we are reading newspapers and magazines and such, titles are larger on purpose because they fight for our attention. But if we're already chosen to listen to that presentation in question, I don't have to lure you in, so to say. The content is now the most important thing on this slide. Now, sometimes when we talk about using dark backgrounds, we get comments like, well, the text won't be legible if the screen is dark because we have a really bad projector or screen. And to be honest, that's not the main issue. If you have a larger font and you think about contrast, it will most probably work even if you have a less than optimal projector. I mean, we have done presentations on those portable, really not good projectors in daylight. Still made it work. So that's not an issue if you think about the other things. Another thing that slide decks and UX have in common is our brains. So if we look at our brains at the same way we look at CPUs, the computer processor, the more stuff we try to throw at the CPU at the same time, the slower it will get, and sometimes it just quits, right? And just like Jimmy said in the beginning, what's for dinner? Massive ducks, small horses. how is he also going to keep all those things in mind at the same time without something else being compromised? How is he even going to listen to me? And that kind of information overload in our brain is called cognitive load. Our brains are not designed for that. Now, there are a few recommendations when it comes to presentations in general. And some say that a presentation should only have 3 major parts. And that's what we have here. We have 3 bullet points. And then there are a few other rules, if you will, like the 166 or the 177. So if we take the 166 as an example, we put 1 message per slide, maximum of 6 items per slide, and a maximum of 6 words per item. So 166. So how many things do we have on our slide again? If you have any guesses, feel free to type it in the chat. These numbers aren't arbitrary. They are based on something that's known as the Miller's Law. And that, in short, says that a person have 6 + 1 memory slots in our brains. However, that has later been proven wrong. The more accurate number is 4. So having 6 items per slide is stretching it. So how many do we have on the slide? 10. We have 10 items, not 3, which you might think, but it's 10. Okay, so time for a confession. If you look down here, it's clearly a date, right? So now for the confession part. It took me a while, and Jimmy even longer, I think, to realize that this isn't when the presentation was made. This is not so you know if this is new or old content. It's today's date. It will always be today's date. Why do you need to know today's date during a talk? On every single slide. Are you afraid that the audience will forget after a slide? Or is it for you? I have no clue.
Well, one of those questions, duck-sized horses and stuff, that might be, what's today's date?
It might be, and you will know it on every single slide. I mean, it might be helpful if you print the slides, so you know when it was printed. But I'm pretty sure that you can add that date in the first or last page or do something else. Pretty sure. Next up, let's talk about color. Now that we removed the dreaded date. Color will steal attention, as you saw Jimmy demonstrated in the beginning. But red is the worst color of them all, because it's the color that travels the fastest to our eyes. Now, why would you need to know, if you look down in the middle, on the very bottom, why do you need to know on every single slide that this is Coding After Work stream and not podcast, as I said in the beginning?
So apparently it would have been a good thing.
Yeah. Huh. That one backfired. But it's even worse if you have an internal presentation where your own company logo is on every single slide. Chances aren't that high that you will forget where you work while you're in the present. Well, you might want to, because it's a boring presentation or something.
I did work for a company that had the company logo on every single slide, and it was red.
Perfect. Did you see anything else on that slide?
Oh, this is where I work. Oh, this is where I work. Oh, this is where I work.
Oh, and you also knew the date.
I did know the date.
Okay, so did you notice I just changed the slide? I can do it again. There we go. The same exact slide. Now, what you don't see is that I have different notes on the computer for that. Sometimes I have a lot of notes, but it doesn't fit into one slide, so I split them up. But you won't see it, right? Now, this goes into my favorite one. Why, if you look, let's see, down here, there. No, I don't know how to do this. Here we go. There we go. Why do your audience need to know what number slide you're on? Sometimes they even show it like this. Now we're on 58 of 96. Now, I have done presentations that I have had 200 slides in 30 minutes. And I have done presentations where I had 20 slides in 60 minutes. So this doesn't give the listener any useful information. So let's remove that as well. If anything, it will stress them out because, oh, they're almost done. And then the ducks and the dinner and the date. Now, Jimmy and I, we held a speaker training session at Ignite a few years back, and we got a question on, but how many slides are you allowed to have? And Jimmy, you're a better storyteller than I am. Can you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah? Awesome. Because I love that story.
So, we talked about removing unnecessary stuff, like the page number, for example. And there was a guy that's wait a minute. You can't remove the slide number. And I said, why? Why is that important? Because I was genuinely curious.
Yeah, we might have missed something.
Yeah. Well, we need to know how many slides are left. Why do you need to know that? Well, we need to know how much time is left. How do you even know that? How much time that if this? I just couldn't get my head around this. So, I mean, I have slides that I'm going to talk about for 5 minutes. I have slides I'm going to talk for 10 minutes. I have slides that's going to take 10 seconds. So the company policy where he worked was that they had a max number of slides set to 20 per hour. Every single slide was 3 minutes long, always. So that way we know that if there are 10 slides left, we know that we have 30 minutes more. Can you imagine that?
No, I would have anxiety all over the place, and I would start timing the slides. And how much do you... I mean, some slides you would have one word on, and some slides would look like, I don't know what.
And the fact that you have perhaps speaker notes that you want to break up into smaller pieces or chunks, nothing of that was going to fly.
No.
And I mean, 3 minutes. Now I'm assuming that they didn't have three or four items per slide. They probably did have a lot of items per slide because they're going to talk about it for 3 minutes. So the slide would be massive. A lot of information.
We have a comment to that. Stacy says, way to distract your audience by making them continually count the minutes left. I know,
Exactly,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. That's even worse than the huge ducks.
Mm-hmm. So here's the thing. The number of slides has never been the problem. It's the amount of information that you cram on there. Jessica?
I don't think this is the solution to cram all of it on one page.
We still have interference on the screen, though, at this point. What value does the actual bullets give you to the content on the screen, do you think?
Oh, I know.
Do you have a number?
Yeah, 3 minutes per slide. No, it could be duck eggs.
Oh, that's true. I mean, the bullet point doesn't add any value at all. So let's just remove those.
Well, they do add clutter.
They add clutter and they add items.
3 more items.
Yeah. So the audience will still understand that these are 3 separate things. Without the bullets or arrows, we know that this is 3 separate items. Another great tool to avoid cognitive load is to click in your points one by one. So we are going to talk about PowerPoint, and then we are going to talk about Google Slides, and then we're going to talk about Keynote.
Is that your presentation voice? I like it.
So by making the previous point a little less contrast, you will see that we can direct the audience exactly where we want the audience to look. We want it to look at the keynote in this case. Now, about 2% of the world population can focus on more than one thing at the time efficiently.
I'm not one of those.
You're not? You're not?
Oh, well, I'm one of those. Not one of the 2%.
Yeah. So design your slides with the other 98% in mind. So by doing small things like the things we've shown you, you can control your audience focus, help them focus on what's important.
And Jimmy, you have a quote that you really like from Jonathan Ives.
I do. So Jonathan Ives, he is one of the, he worked at Apple. So he's a former designer for Apple. And he said, an indicator has a value when it's indicating something. But when it's not indicating something, it shouldn't be there. So if your content on your slide doesn't add anything to the message, or doesn't help visualize the message, visualize, get to the chopper. So if it doesn't help visualize the content, it shouldn't be there. So if you noticed on, I believe it's the MacBook or something Apple, the charging light is not going to be visible unless it's actually charging the device.
Yeah, and that's what he was referring to.
Yeah.
Don't light up if you're not doing something.
Or the light shouldn't even be there.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy as it sounds, though. It is a challenge. Perhaps the biggest challenge you'll have. So
when you're doing presentations.
Or maybe the biggest challenge. You never know. So let's take a look at some examples. So here's some information for constructing a great TED Talk. Now, this as a slide is just horrific. That's way too much information. So first we need to identify the keywords. Luckily, they're right there. Should offer new value. Should be passionate and authentic. And should use stories and examples. So that's our points. You can still say, say the whole thing. I mean, all of the text, but it doesn't have to be on the screen. So then we apply the same things that we talked about earlier. The content should be bigger, and the header should be smaller. And then, of course, we remove the red because, well, the red doesn't add anything at this point. So we're back to just pure white. But we also said 1 point per slide. I mean, this could be an agenda or something like that, but we could do it like this instead. So we can say new and valuable. Passion and authenticity.
Another pun.
It is. and stories and example. And having images like this, in many cases, they will invoke a feeling. And if they do, there's 20% more likely to remember what you said. So what if we want this as an overview? Well, we can have them appear one by one, new and valuable, passion and authenticity, stories and examples. We can also do it the same way with like doing the previous items are going to be grayed out, and we're just going to have the stories and examples. We can also add a hue so they belong better together.
And that's great if you actually don't have that many images with the same exact look.
And by using animations, we can let the visual cortex take over, which will lower the cognitive load. So instead of just popping things all over the place, we can do a little subtle animation instead. Now, young people, very young people, and old people has a harder time identifying changes, and by using animations, we will help them see what is happening. So PowerPoint is a visual aid to help you visualize your points. Using PowerPoint the right way, or Google Slides or Keynote will enhance your message. So PowerPoint is a visual aid. You are the presentation. The PowerPoint is not. Presentation skills is not PowerPoint skills.
No, that could be an email.
That could be an email. If someone asks you for the presentation afterwards, you had some great information in the slides, could I get a copy of that slide or that slide deck? You probably had too much information in there. And to be fair, it has happened to me.
Yeah.
Perhaps you too.
Well, they did ask for my presentation when I did the UX for developers talk, where I have pictures of pink superheroes, My Little Ponies, and stuff like that. I don't know what they want with them, but feel free. It's fun.
They like My Little Ponies.
Yep. Who doesn't?
Yep. And if anyone wants the slides for the duck, I would be happy to share it. So one message per slide. Of course, that is not, in this case, it's a summary. So
there are exceptions to the rule.
There are.
But at least we have grayed out the other stuff.
Yeah. Max 6 objects per slide, or actually 4 objects per slide.
That would be better.
Yeah. And now I realize that we have like a million objects on this slide.
Yeah, but we could, to make this better, we could actually remove the summary, the title summary.
That's true. And that's actually a great point, because should we have a header at all? Doesn't have to.
No, we don't have to. And that's something, sometimes I find myself trying to find the perfect name for the header. Mm-hmm. How do I summarize this section? But I don't have to.
No.
It's very rare that I do need a title.
Yeah. So remember that. One way might be just removing the title.
I love this one.
Now we don't want these kinds of slides. This is, as you can see, a real example. Or this one. Now, there is an exception to this rule as well. If you want to show someone how complex something is, that is...
This is a perfect slide for that.
It is. You want to show that the cognitive load to understand what I'm talking about is huge. This slide is okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were trying to do that or not.
They might have, but it's very important that you don't want them, and that you don't want or need them to remember anything on this.
Yeah. Because this is just going to be an overload.
Yeah, but to prove a point, for instance, if you are showing off how many different things and features your application have, or how many cool, I don't know, new features the latest application. Did I just say the same thing twice? Yeah. Then you can also do this, as long as you don't want them to remember anything.
And we actually haven't talked about that, but having a lot of content on the slide is going to, the focus is going to, well, we talked about the focus from what from me is going to go over to the slide, but also the audience is not going to listen to what I have to say.
No, they are going to try to read that.
Yeah. And they read, in some cases at least, faster than you talk. So they're going to be ahead of you. They're going to read all the content, and then they're just going to ask, well, why is this person still talking about this?
And where's my duck? My giant duck.
Yeah. I want my duck. The mighty duck. Now, this is a course in presentation skills. PowerPoint that amplifies and enhances. This is a Swedish slide. So
yeah, and the translation of the blue box.
Now, what does it enhance?
Migraines? Yeah, I think it's migraines.
Must be migraines.
Could be anxiety. Could be overwhelming feelings.
The cognitive load. And it's actually the same template that we used in the beginning.
It is. You see the point? The arrows.
This was a really big conference in Sweden that looked like this.
And here's the funny thing. They have taken the time and money and effort to remove the cognitive load, or whatever you want to call it in this case, for the podiums. Because they know that the presentation, the speakers are the most important thing on this scene. So they knew halfway, and then they forgot.
So do we have any questions at this point?
I don't think so. How do you stay awake during a presentation like that?
Caffeine.
Caffeine and giant ducks. Yeah, that's a good tip.
So let's switch back to our full camera. There we go. So thank you so much for joining us. And now we hope that you won't do another presentation with as much cognitive load as some of the previous ones that you had to endure.
Yeah, because now you know why.
So if you have any questions when it comes to presentation skills or PowerPoint or whatever, please reach out, because we love doing things like this.
And also, if you have any requests on what you want to see in this series in the upcoming episodes.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you.